to Module 11. You've made it to the last content module for the course. In this content module, I wanted to touch on social imagination. I didn't want you to leave this summer without thinking about it because a lot of the things we've been talking about reading inside and outside of text and using writing in more agentic and powerful ways is because students build this idea of social imagination through those activities. And so to begin with, to dive into this concept, we're going to think quickly about reader's theater, which many of you may have encountered either in the program or in clinical experiences. So reader's theater is an approach or a method in which students reenact a story or a piece of information that's been given to them. There are a lot of benefits to reader's theater. A couple that I'll highlight here is that reader's theater provides a platform for students to generate a deeper construction of not only the story, but also things like language. They can also activate a lot of those strategic skills that we want readers to develop, such as inference making or analysis or summarizing, that sort of thing. It provides students a wide range of ways to engage with literacy. So students, it's much more multimodal. So it can allow students who have different learning styles or preferences than just verbally communicating to kind of become engaged with what is in front of them. And then really, because it's an open platform, students can draw on their different funds of knowledge or their cultural, social, and personal practices to recreate what is in front of them. So we're going to play around with reader's theater today and eventually link it back to this idea of social imagination. So I've chosen a quite simple story here that many of you might be familiar with, The Little Red Hen. I'm going to go ahead and play this fable for you just to jog your memory. It's a short video. Here we go. Oops. There we go.
The Little Red Hen. The little red hen lived on a big farm with all kinds of animals. One day, while she was walking, the little red hen came across some seeds. She decided to plant them. "Who will help me?" she asked her friends. "Not I," said the bull. "Not I," said the mouse. "Not I," said the dog. "Then I'll do it," said the little red hen, and so she planted all of the seeds by herself. It took a while, but the seeds grew into a field of wheat. "Who will help me cut the wheat?" asked the little red hen. "Not I," quacked the duck. "Not I," meowed the cat. "Not I," brayed the bull. The little red hen sighed and said, "Then I'll do it." And she cut the wheat all by herself. After cutting all the wheat, the little red hen just wanted to rest, but her work wasn't done yet. "Who will help me take the wheat to the mill to be ground into flour?" she asked. "Not I," squeaked the mouse. "Not I," barked the dog. "Not I," quacked the duck. "Then I'll do it," said the little red hen, and she took the wheat to be ground, and then she carried the heavy sack of flour all the way back to the farm. The exhausted little red hen then asked her friends, "Who will help me bake the bread?" "Not I," said the cat. "Not I," said the bull. "Not I," said the dog. The little red hen said, "Then I guess I'll bake it myself." Once the bread was finished, the little red hen asked, "Who will help me eat this bread?" "We will," said the duck and the dog. "Us too," said the bull and the cat. "And don't forget me," said the mouse. "Nope," said the little red hen. "This bread is for those who worked on it." And then she relaxed and enjoyed all of her hard work.
All right, so that is the story of the Little Red Hen, and it's often read in early childhood settings, but we're going to do something more complex with it. So if I were to have you do,
Thanks for
oh, we
watching.
don't need to play that again. If I were to have you create a reader's theater script, and this was going to be a learning experience, but because it's the last week, I'll just kind of walk us through this. The most important part to reader's theater is that we make sure that the students are involved in the production of the script and the play. This is really key. A lot of times, or I've been seeing these kind of pre-scripted readers theater packages that schools can purchase. The problem with them, though, is that the scripts are often provided to the students. So if you're just giving students a script to read and act out, that isn't the essence of reader theater. You're not going to get all those benefits that I just listed, because the part that matters the most is that reinterpretation, where students can use their own languages, where they can add to the story. So that's really what we need to see. We need to see students involved in the script writing and then taking that script and bringing it to life in communication with others. So the other aspect of that is the discussion part with the people or their peers that they're making the script with. That doesn't mean we don't want to scaffold. Certainly that's an important concept, because producing a script might not come easily for everyone, especially if they're trying to do that as a group. So here's an idea. This would obviously be for younger elementary, but of a way that I've used to scaffold it. I give them parts of the script, and then they have to fill in most of it. I could even drop this even more, and it's certainly always revisable. They can decide what they want to do with it or change it up some. So if you were to have walked through this process, then there would have been a lot of benefits to it. But if we look at all of these standards that I've listed here, and I selected first grade standards, they all will have been touched on, right? So through recreating or re-envisioning or rewriting the story, they would have wrestled with the central theme. They would have been describing the character, setting, and major events. They would have paid attention to the illustrations in the story and the detail to describe or characterize. And they also would have had to think about the different characters' experiences. And that's not even to name the writing standards, which would have been involved if y'all or they were writing this. So it not only has lots of benefits, but it also hits the standards. But the truth of the matter is that we can take this even deeper. So readers theater, traditional readers theater is beneficial, but to really get kids active and to push it into this idea of disciplinary literacy, we can kind of do readers theater 2.0. What does that look like? Well, I often, and I've done this with my students, my younger students, I have kids think through popular fables or stories, and I tried to get them to orient to another point of view. And so in this instance, I'll give you an activity I've done. I engage them in the disciplinary practices of journalism. So we've been talking so far about disciplinary literacy as it relates to math, science, social studies, and literature. But there are other certain disciplines out there that have their own set of practices. So journalism would be one of it. And that's just not the production of articles, it's the actual thinking practices that they engage. So how do you interview somebody? How do you take that interview and translate it into something else? What are the issues of ethics? So in this activity, I have different people, staff members around the school, pretend to be the other animals in Little Red Hen. And my students go out and interview them. And they ask the question, why didn't you help Little Red Hen? And each of the staff members provides different interviews to different groups of students. And the students have to come back and they have to take the information that they gained and rewrite a script from the perspective of the barnyard animals to try to get why perhaps they didn't. Is there justification for that? So that's what you're about to do. Now you won't have anybody to interview, but I think you can sit here and try to reimagine. So if this story was written through the perspective of the cow, I think it was a mouse and a cat in this version, what would they say? And so go ahead, I'm giving you kind of leeway just to write in the comment section and to revise your own script. So you can pause this, have some fun, and when you come back, we'll connect it to social imagination. Okay. All right then. So, a few things I wanted to mention is there are some websites that if you're looking for different centers or activities for students to do, kind of play around with this idea. So this Fractured Fairy Tales is a website. It's a simple one, but they can write their own fractured fairy tales where they reimagine these three and they can change up the setting and the idea and all of that. So there are different platforms that help you with this, but this would be a very individualized activity. Again, to get the true benefits, you want them to be doing this in group because we all know collaborative learning is better than just having students work individually. So the reason that I bring this to your attention is that this goes back to that idea we talked about early on in the semester that every text is partial. So it all is just one particular point of view and happening in one moment of time, right? So we don't know, we can imagine what happens before or after. We can imagine different role players in there and what they would be thinking. So when I've done this, and some people have even published books, many of you might have heard, why am I losing sight of it? The big bad wolf. So the perspective of the three little pigs through the big bad wolf. So it's similar to that. And some of the other things I've seen is, for instance, the story of the three billy goats gruff, if you're familiar with that. Instead of a mean troll, you can flip it and think about how the troll must have felt with the goats walking over the bridge. And some people have even played with that language. So in this story, the troll comes out of the bridge and says, "I'll have you for dinner." And it's always been interpreted as a mean troll. However, that same line could have been the troll inviting them over for dinner. If you're thinking about some old language perhaps that we've used where they'll say, "I'll have you for dinner," like as an inviting. Same with Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We can think about why. I mean, one of the questions that's often posed is why does this girl just randomly walk into a cottage? So to have students really think about that and to revise the story from Goldilocks. One of the things I've seen is that people say that, like, well, before the porridge was even made, maybe Baby Bear has invited Goldilocks over, and then he plays like he doesn't know her because he doesn't want to get in trouble. So students have all types of fun with these if you give them the space to rethink them. And this all leads to this idea of social imagination. So I kind of wanted to highlight it through it because you can start to envision what this means. So the idea of social imagination, it's connected to the empathy, but beyond empathy, it's really about can we engage in perspective taken to connect to people whose experiences might be different or they might be affected differently by something that is going on. And so instead of thinking of humans and myself as just an individualized person, this idea of social imagination really connects the we. So it starts to kind of get at the heart of our democracy, thinking about, how do we make decisions based on the collective, not just the individual. And so if we engage social imagination, it helps students go beyond these binaries that often exist in the world, such as good or bad or greedy and grateful, and helps students to imagine a more complex world. And the reason we want to do this is because if we are tasked with preparing our students for career in college or even to be successful in our society, this is really the basis of what it might take to think in very nuanced and compelling ways to problem solve. And so a quote that I like over here on the right is this idea that actually President Obama made in his farewell speech because he connects it to a piece of literature that many of us might be familiar with. But I think it's really helpful to think about what we're doing, not only teaching kids to read and write and do math and think about history and science, but what it is we're cultivating. And he said, but laws alone won't be enough. Hearts must change. It won't change overnight. Social attitudes oftentimes take generations to change. But if our democracy is to work the way it should in this increasingly diverse nation, then each one of us needs to try to heed the advice of a great character in American fiction, Atticus Finch, who said, quote, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. So yes, it is wearing other people's shoes, not just so that we can feel that empathy, but so that we can start to take action and really think about how we're all interconnected and what the best course of action might be to get us, to move us forward. And so you can build social imagination not just through engaging in narratives and literature, but also thinking about how do I take informational texts that are presented to my student and have them cultivate social imagination. So here is an example over here on the right side of the screen. This was completed, I think, in 6th grade around students after they had read a lot about the Vietnam War. And then the activity was for the students to take all they know and take a quote that really struck them. So this student picked a quote from a soldier, and then write poetry, so present a different type of mode that they have been reading that encapsulates what you envision this soldier feeling, so the complexities of that, and then also showing some of the things that they had gained knowledge about the Vietnam War. So you can read the poem here on the right side. Okay, so you can start to see if a student can think through these things, it can think through this unique position in the world, then they have more information to make choices and to move us forward, to propose ideas, to work out solutions. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm actually going back to some of your learning experiences that you all created, because I would argue that's what a lot of you were doing. So I think it was Sarah who did the hunger, maybe it was Catherine, but the one who at the end posed the problem about world hunger, right? So once we have social imagination, we can start to think about, how it affects people differently, but also the systems that are connected to those that we need to think about and work through. The same is true for some of you who talked about issues of segregation or looking across the communities. We have to know, we have to be able to feel, we have to be able to take on that perspective. And then we have to be able to come together and talk about what are all the systems and the different players involved here. And so really what social imagination is, it underlies all the disciplines. It's not just something we do when we read and write, it's what we do when we read and write in different disciplines. It helps us in science when we try to create experiments and then think about how those experiments are either going to help us or the environment or the connection between us. And it's something you want to help students with, to think about both in local and global settings. So one of the ways that we know is most beneficial to students is authentic learning. And a lot of times in authentic learning, we want to give them or put in front of them complex problems to be solved. So they're learning the content by engaging in these complex problem solving. I think many times we rush to have students think globally at first, but local is where we want to start. We want them to start in their own schools and communities and think about problems. And we want it to be student-centered. So a lot of times I think teachers are well-intentioned and they bring in a problem, but what we want to try to do is have students notice the world around them and then generate a problem. And I'll give you an example that I like that I heard from another scholar once, is that she was in a school, and what the kids decided to do is that they were upset because one of their favorite breads for the hot dog buns was replaced. So they were no longer eating these hot dogs, I think it was, in this bread that they had enjoyed, the hot dog bun. And so the students decided that was the issue they wanted to take on, because they knew a lot of their peers were disappointed in this. And so they got together, and with their teacher's support, they wrote the superintendent, and they asked questions, and they talked to different people, and they tried to figure out where the problem was, and it all came down to funding. And they petitioned to get them back in, and they actually won. So that's how you can start small. You can have students really take up a problem, and then after that you want to go big, or gradually have them go bigger. And all of that is what they're doing through that process, through contacting different people, through learning about the issue, is they're building their social imagination. They're thinking about different players. They're thinking about tensions and issues between wants and funding and how things are funded, and they're learning a lot about the world. So with that said, you can complete the last learning experience 2. The learning experience 2 talks about geoliteracy, which really kind of takes it all together in a big way. And I want you to think about that concept in relation to elementary teaching. And then learning experience 3 is actually the course evaluation. So please make sure to complete that. I'd love to hear from each one of you about your experiences this summer. And once you're done with that, you're just on to Module 12, which introduces the final reflection, and then you're almost done with the course.